Hi and welcome to another episode of TRX Bench. Well, today I have here a Yaesu FT-7900. So that is a VHF-UHF radio, and it simply will not fire up. So I have literally not more informations. So let's simply connect it to the power supply and see how it reacts, and then let's see what we can do. So that is all we know up to now. Okay, so our radio is connected so far into our diagram to find a point where we can start. And okay, as always, let's start with our block diagram. And most important for us is, of course, how the front panel and the radio itself communicate to each other. And what we easily can see here, that we have, of course, our CPU in the radio, and we have the front end CPU, which is this here, and down here we have our radio CPU, or main CPU, if you will. And then we have the usual or the well-known communication. So it is a serial communication, and you can easily see it here. So we have a transmit line and we have a receive line. So that is the way how the front panel or the front end CPU is communicating with the main CPU. And well, what we can see else, that we have here the power button, which is directly connected to the main CPU, and once started the process that we want to fire up the radio, it tries to get the radio alive. So that means the question is now, is it a communication issue we are facing here, or is it something different? So maybe do we really get here our power supply for our front end CPU, or is it really maybe the wiring here between front end and the radio? I mean, it is at least a radio which is installed in a car, and maybe that we have a problem with the communication line between here our panel and our radio itself, because this is I guess a 3-meter long wire, and maybe that something is wrong with the wire. So that is something what very often happens. So that is of course our main interest, to see if maybe something is wrong with the wiring. So that is the first we want to look after, and then do we have here our 9-volt power supply for our front end panel. When I press here our button, the radio tries to start up, but it doesn't work. So that is still the same question. Is there a problem with here our communication, right? And you see it is really a long wire. And secondly, we of course have the question, is there maybe something wrong with here our voltage supply in our in our front panel? So that is the same approach. So let's see what's going on. Alright, and lucky I am. So I have here a short test wire. So this is really for car installation, and so the easiest way, of course, is to connect here a short wire where we are sure that it is working. So let me connect this both wires and let's see if this is doing the trick. Nope, it is not the wire, obviously. So then our next step will be testing for the 9 volt. Okay, and here is our panel unit, and yeah, we have seen that the connection wire between the panel unit and the main unit was obviously not the problem. So let's concentrate on the panel unit, and yeah, let me zoom in. And yeah, as we already discussed, we have here our 9 volt, and we want to see on which test point we can find it. So it is here, alright, 9 volt, and it is the test point 2001. So let me enlarge it a bit more. Maybe you are not really able to see it, but I guess now it is much better. So our 9 volt should be present at test point 2001, and of course tested against ground. So let's go into and down to the radio, or no, first we have to see where we find our test point 2001, and therefore here we find a lot of our test points. Yeah, and we are looking for test point 2001, and yeah, we have it here. So here is our 2001, and at that test point we should see our 9 volt. So let's go first for that. I cracked open both, and first of all, yeah, I have connected here my wire to ground, and let me check if ground is present here at the panel unit. So let's check it here. Yeah, and you can hear it. Ground is present, so we can leave our ground wire down here, and now we can switch the meter to DC, and then we can go for our 2001, and if we go down here, so we should find it down here. Yeah, but let me reposition the camera that we can all see what's going on. Okay, so it should be fine. We all can see our voltmeter, and yeah, so let me go down. Radio is connected to the power supply. Let me first go down here just for checking, and you see 13.8. That means all is fine, and the radio really gets our 13.8 volt, but that is no question, because we have seen that the radio tried to get in connection with the panel unit. Alright, so let's go down here to the test point, and there is definitely nothing. Okay, so let me try to start the radio. Check if you can see it. Yeah, let me try to start the radio while I'm probing here my 9 volt test point. Okay, so what we see is that while we are trying to fire the radio up, the 9 volt is coming through. Alright, so that means it is obviously not our 9-volt supply, so that is not the problem. So we need to go ahead and see how we can probe forward. Okay, and since the front panel processor is working with 5 volt, there is a little voltage regulator here on the board, which is this little part here. And of course we need to check if we have the 5 volt at the output. So once again, let's first check the input, and now I try to start the radio and we see 8.9, and that is exactly what we expect. And now at the output we should see our 5 volt. Let's see. And 4.9, oh, that is just fine. So that means that obviously our front end voltages are fine. So I mean, we still do not know if the reset pulse is fine and such, but I think it is important to have a deeper look onto the main board where we have our voltage distribution, which we should to investigate a little bit more. Yeah, and we are looking here at the main board, and well, you see that here our 13.8 supply voltage is entering the main board, and we have here all our voltage regulators, so all the different voltages we have. So for instance, which one is it? So this one here is our 9-volt supply, and if we follow here along, we see that definitely this here is a 9 volt, which goes over to the panel board, and of course there are additional voltages. Here we have a 5 volt supply, and here is a 4.98 whatever supply. More down here, so this here is a 5 volt supply as well, which is finally supplying here the voltage to the processor. So that is what we wanna look after at the next step, just to be sure that there is not something wrong. I just want to make sure that the voltages are all given, not that at the end maybe one important voltage is missing, and that might be the issue why the processor is directly shutting down again. And therefore let's look into that. Yeah, and unfortunately we do not have all our components for voltage supply. All the different voltages are not all here on the A side of our main board. So some important parts are, as always, on the B side, and that again means we need to take out the board to get access to the B side, and then we can go and check all the different voltages and all the different supply lines and so forth and so forth. So let me take the board out first. Okay, before we go ahead with any further voltage measurements, I just want to make sure that finally the reset circuit is working, because we know that if a CPU does not get reset, then everything can be really weird, and therefore first let's check if the reset is working. So well, let me see that we have here our information. So you see here we get our well, one moment, you can't see it. One moment, okay. Here we have our 13.8 volt, so that is where the voltage is coming in. And we see that this here, our 5 volt regulator, you see at the output we have 5 volt, or we should have 5 volt, which is a permanent supply for our main CPU, right? And that is needed because if there is no voltage present at the processor, then of course if we press our on button, nothing would happen. So we need a permanent voltage at the processor. So that is this 5 volt, okay? And additional to that, we have here with all these components, we have our reset circuit. So what does it mean? If our voltage regulator comes up and we will see 5 volt, so that is what we would expect, then of course our reset circuit should show for some milliseconds, 10, 20, 30, I don't know, we should see, of course, here our reset pulse, right? And after the reset pulse was coming up, then of course you see we should then have here 4.95 volt as well. But for the moment where we really get our reset here from our Q1050, this here will be switched on, and we get ground for this I don't know, 20, 30, 40 milliseconds. So that is what I want to check if this is working just as it should. Yeah, and I've done it, so it is a little bit tricky to hold the probes, but you can see what has happened. So this here is of course our 5 volt CPU power supply, and it is set to 2 volt per division, so that means 2, 4, so as you can see it is approximately 5 volt, and you see voltage is rising after I press my or no, not I press my button. So if I connect my power supply to the radio, right? So as I said, we need our permanent 5 volt, and you see directly after I have connected it to my power supply, you see the rising voltage up to 5 volt. In the same time frame, you see here the voltage at our reset point, and you see the voltage is rising as well in the same manner as what we can see here for our 5 volt power regulator, right? And then you see it is dropping, and yeah, scope is set to 10 milliseconds, so that means I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, approximately 50 milliseconds we have a low, and then it is going up as well. So while we have already our 5 volt present at our microprocessor, we have here our reset pulse, and that means reset at the main processor is working just fine, as well our power supply, our 5 volt for supplying our CPU with the needed voltage. So everything is fine, no problem with that. So now we have to go ahead. Okay, and well, obviously I had some problems with my SD card, so I lost some already recorded content, and yeah, so we are a bit far ahead from the point where I have the last recording. So yeah, sorry for that. Don't know what really happened, but yeah. Anyways, so we are yeah, we are really coming into the right direction. So you see that I have here, as you can see, a resistor, and you see I have a resistor over there. And yeah, so I'm already at the point where, and you can see it, we are really at the point where we are able to start the radio. Nothing done additionally, so I do not know if it is really receiving. We only hear the static. But anyways, let me tell you the story, what has happened so far. Yeah, for that, let us have a look here into our schematic. And as we discussed earlier here in the video, we really tested all the voltage supply on the board. So that means here all the different voltage regulators, and you've seen we have tested here our reset pulse, and I have also tested here the oscillator. Oscillator is also working fine. I have tested that we have traffic here between our EEPROM and the MCU, so that is all just fine, no problem. So at that point I was quite confident that really everything with power distribution is just fine. Then going to the panel unit, and of course we have here the panel unit CPU, which is of course this IC here, and it was exactly the same. I tested here the reset pulse as we have done it, and as I have explained it with the main MCU, and therefore the reset here is fine as well. And as well, what we have tested is here our oscillator. So oscillator is working just fine. So you see everything works perfect, and as well, and that is then given here, our 5-volt regulator is also working fine, and no problem whatsoever. But what I recognized is that there is not really traffic here on our serial line. So let's enlarge it a little bit more. So you see we have here RX and we have here TX. So that is a serial data line between here our panel unit and finally our main unit. And I have recognized that there is no traffic, and therefore I went back to our main unit, and on the main unit, which is now here in our view, we have of course again our TX and RX pins. So you see that yeah, pin 19 and 20 here at our main MCU has as well this serial data lines, of course. So that is needed to get the communication between main and front or panel processor. And yeah, I was not able to see the traffic. So normally our main processor starts communicating to the panel, and then the panel answers. And what I have seen is that there was very limited activity here on our TX line, okay? And I couldn't see any reaction on the RX line. And now you are really coming to a point where it gets critical, because we have seen that we have here data and clock line from our EEPROM was just fine, and that you really now at a point where you could conclude, is there maybe the main or the front panel processor somewhat faulty? So now you're really at a point, you do not really know. And then, of course, we have here our wiring between main unit and the front panel. And of course, this wiring is always an issue, and therefore I tested once again if there is continuity between main unit and front panel, and I was definitely sure that here our wiring is just fine, and we even tested it with a short wire, and it was the same problem. So I was absolutely sure that there is definitely no issue with our wiring here between main and front panel, right? So, and again, I really thought, do we have now here really an issue on our MCU? But I thought, this all is already a little bit odd, and as I told you, I have seen that the main processor just tried to send an information to the front panel MCU, but the data looked like a little bit funny, and therefore I thought, maybe it is trying. And then I thought, okay, you see here directly behind our processor this both resistors, both are 1K, and when you go along to the western connector where we have our wiring between main and front, you see here on our TX and RX line again we have 1K resistor, and here as well a 1K resistor. And then when we go over to our front panel, that is again the front panel, you see where this serial data lines come in. You see that we have again here 1K, and once again here 1K and 1K. And I thought, the last step is really to check if we have continuity or not really continuity. We should see between the main processor pin and at least here our front panel CPU pin. We should see 1K, 2K, and then the both resistors on the main panel. So altogether we should see somewhat 4K between the pins, right from the main CPU to the front panel CPU, right? So we should see 4K, and that is what I tested, and I then recognized that I have somewhat around 50, 60, 80 kilo ohm on the TX line. So the RX line was just fine. And what I tested as well, here our pull-up resistors, because if you look here to this both resistors, you see that this resistors, if we are following along down here to the voltage regulator, so this is our 5 volt here on the front panel, right? That was wrong. Once again, panel unit. We are on the panel unit. Yeah, we see that this both are on our finally our pull-up resistors, and yeah, I have tested the 5 volt, which are of course here on this line. You can see this 5 volts as well on finally the main unit. So I tested here, this is again the main unit, and I tested the pull-up voltage here on the TX and on the RX line, so it was simply present, so no problem. And I thought, okay, what's really going on here? I'm testing between the both pins here on the TX line. I really testing 50, 60, 80 or even more resistance, and that was somewhat odd. And then I tested here the R1219, okay, and I've seen that the resistance, and I tested it in circuit, and if you test in circuit you could see a lower resistor than this 1K, but you should not see a higher resistor, and it was, so I was wrong, it was not 50K what I tested somewhat 500K, right? And you know, I tested here directly across the resistor, and I have seen this approximately whatever 500K, okay, and I thought, that is really funny, and that was then the point where I added for test purposes here this resistor simply here to the board, right? And I tried to start the radio once again, but no way, the radio didn't start up. So then exactly the same, I double checked here my panel. Yeah, and on the front panel the same problem. There is again a resistor on the board with a high resistance, but it is not open, so that is the odd thing. So normally you would expect that the resistor is really completely open, but it isn't. So again, some ohms higher than it normally should, and therefore I did exactly the same. I put this resistor over the original one, and yeah, so when I had this both resistors finally then connected to this board, both boards, then we definitely have the situation that you see radio is firing up again, and it is working. So that is what happened in between, where yeah, I lost finally here my memory card. And well, so what we do now, we of course have to replace the resistors which I have put here on for test purposes with good SMD resistors, and then yeah, we can check if the radio still receives and if all the different functions are given. So okay, let's go ahead with simply adding new resistors to both boards. Okay, so the first what we have to do, of course, we have to take away here our resistor, and yeah, let's start with our first steps here. So that was the test lead, and now okay, very nice. And already now you can see here the resistor right down here, okay. And when you watch it, really you can't see, even here under the microscope, once again, it is this little guy here. Even under the microscope you do not see that the resistor has any burning marks or what, nothing. So you really can't see it. And yeah, let me take it out, and then let's again test its resistance to know what's going on. Yeah, that is really funny. Okay, so we have already flux here in place, and now we really have to go down here, and we try to get our resistor out. Let's see how. Yeah, all right. So it is out. Try that I do not lose it. Okay. Yeah, and again you can see here on the board that our resistor is again a bit too large, but as we did it with our last repair, we will fit this resistor in, and therefore let's see. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. And of course now we have to do the other side, and we simply place here our resistor onto the test pad. So that is quite okay, so no problem with doing it like this. Okay, where do we need to go? Somewhere here. Very nice. Yeah, what you can see here is that it is sometimes really difficult to find the spot where you need to solder. It is on the PCB really sometimes not really easy. Okay, hope that we can do now here. Our other side. Yeah, very nice. That looks pretty good, no problem. Okay, let me clean here my iron. Okay, very nice. And he was a little bit out of the field of view. Yeah, sorry. So it is really sometimes here a little bit difficult, but basically I believe you see that we have our new resistor in, and now we will do exactly the same on the front panel unit. and I think I do not really show it twice. So it is finally the same procedure. I will clean now here the area a little bit, and then I go over to our front panel board. Okay, so our both new resistors are in, so everything is just fine. And yeah, so radio is connected to the power supply. And now let's see, where's my button there? Okay, so let's see if it is working. And yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So, and static is there as well. Great. So that is really going in the right direction. I mean, this kind of trouble is really tricky, because you do not really expect to have resistors which are changed their value. I mean, we know that from very old radios from the 30s, 40s, or maybe some from the 50s. We know that some of these old resistors have changed over the time in resistance, but it is a bit new. I mean, this is here the FT-7900, which is finally, or still, it is still the latest version. And so you do not really expect that resistors are changing so much in its value that finally the radio don't work any longer. And I mean, why do we have the same problem on both here on the panel board? I mean, down here we have the new resistor as well, and here two resistors in the same line which have changed the value. And you know, I believe that something has happened to the radio, because I cannot believe that it is due to aging, and if so, why two resistors on the same line? But again, I cannot see any burning marks on the resistors, so it is still weird. It is really still weird. So I can tell you, it is a very seldom issue. I mean, I've seen so many things, but this is it is a kind of special. Okay, so we are making progress. So front panel is back in housing, and yeah, we have it in the chassis, the main board, and let's test if still is fine. And yes, it looks like very nice. Okay, so the next I want to do is to connect back here our antenna connector to be able to test the radio for TX and of course RX. Okay, so everything is back together for testing, and you already can see it here. So we are receiving, and yeah, that is already awesome, right? And I already see the figures on the tester, so let's go over. And here we have it. So let me here switch off the speaker, and you see everything is really nice. So it is working just fine. You can see it here. Yeah, and we are here on an S9 level, and you see our synod is just fine, almost 40 dB, which is really good. And so yeah, it is given here. And of course I have switched over here to 70 centimeter for 33, just in a frequency for testing, and we have finally the same result, right? And I just performed here our sensitivity test. You see our 12 dB point is at minus 120, yeah, almost 4, and that is absolutely fine. So let's go back to 2 meter. Let's do exactly the same. And I've done here on 2 meter exactly the same, and you see our 12 dB point is at yeah, approximately the same level, which is definitely fine. We hear, of course, the signal in the noise, so that is no wonder. But we are really fulfilling the specs if we are talking about our RX on both 70 centimeter and 2 meter. Just perfect. Okay, and now we are interested in transmit, so I had to put here my high power power supply to the radio, and yeah, so that is done. We are still on 2 meter, and let's see. Yeah, so radio is set to low, which is approximately 5 watt, which is definitely, or what we are testing here is 4.3. And I'm interested if we see modulation, and yes, we see. So that means modulation is also working great. Okay, so what does it mean? So receive works, transmit works, modulation works. That means everything is fine, and that means radio is back alive. I just want to stop the video here. I have of course to do some minor adjustings here and there, and I have to put all the screws here back to the chassis, so I only have the screws in here for final and pre-final, and of course here for our audio chip to have the heatsink. So some little minor things I have to do, but radio is back working, so really that is awesome, as it was really a tricky fault. Again, this resistor thing, it is really a little bit funny. Maybe that someone of you may have an idea why this resistor went high resistance. And again, I have tested the resistor. It was approximately 50 kilo ohm. So unbelievable, right? Anyways, tricky fault, not easy to find, but radio is really back working. Everything is honky donkey. And let me stop the video here. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time. Bye.